New York Giants co-owner John Mara makes a bold proclamation about the futures of head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen. We're going to talk about that and why what John Mara said is the right thing to do for the franchise despite how things are going. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, New York Giant fans. Welcome on in to another episode of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find my written work. And as always, welcome on in to my Blue Crew community members, to my everydayers, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL. That's all lowercase letters, by the way. And you'll win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, on today's Locked On Giants podcast, John Mara had some things to say last night at a screening of a documentary for his late father, Wellington. The documentary, The Duke, The Giant Life of Wellington Mara, will premiere on the NFL Network on Friday. But of course, everybody was interested in the state of the Giants, the current state of the Giants, as opposed to the historic state of the Giants, where it was a little bit better than it is these days. So we'll talk about what John Mara had to say, which by now is pretty well known, and why it's the right decision for ownership to take on the stances of head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen. Then we'll take a look at the current state of the left tackle situation. Where is that trending? And what do I think is going to happen based on what I've been able to gather? We'll talk about that. And then finally, Daniel Jones spoke for the second time since being benched against the Eagles on Sunday night, but for the first time since having additional conversations with head coach Brian Daboll. And I'll tell you a little bit about where things stand with that and kind of why the Giants are backed into a corner with Daniel Jones. So that's our schedule of topics for today's show. Again, welcome on in. Let's talk about the headliner, John Mara, last night at a screening for his late father, Wellington, called The Duke, The Giant Life of Wellington Mara, told reporters afterwards that head coach Brian Daboll and general manager Joe Schoen are safe, right? That he is not inclined, he being John Mara, to be making any changes in season and also probably not in the off season. And this is regardless of how the team finishes up. Now, if you go back to earlier in the year, John Mara, as he is asked every year, was asked, what do you need to see in order to continue with the team of Daboll and Schoen? And he said, I want to feel like we're making progress. Well, you look at the Giants' record right now, 2-5, the state of the offense, and some people will say that ain't exactly progress they're making. But on the flip side, they are making progress on the defensive side of the ball. They've made progress with the offensive line, of course, prior to the Andrew Thomas injury, but the offensive line was heading in the right direction. Malik Neighbors has been everything they've asked for. The one area where they continue to struggle, which we will talk about even more later on in the program, has been at quarterback. But I want to talk about, before I get to the quarterback situation, which, by the way, John Mara did not endorse Daniel Jones for the future. He kind of sidestepped that issue, saying that there'll be a time and place to talk about individual players, which I took to mean that Daniel Jones is not going to be a part of this team come next year. But let's talk about, the decision that apparently has been made to retain Daboll and Schoen. Folks, I've said this before. We'll say it again. continuity is important. And I know that there are people out there who are going to say, well, look at the continuity that the Giants have had. They've been losing, they barely make the playoffs, and when they do, they don't go very far. What kind of continuity have they had? They've just been a losing franchise for the better part of the last decade. Folks, here's the thing. You cannot keep turning over the GM and the head coach. At some point, you've got to say, okay, do I have the right group in place? And if so, even though things might not be going the way I want, is it their doing or is it the fault of the personnel? Now, I don't want to put all the blame on Daniel Jones, but he has been the common denominator over the last, few years. Daniel Jones was inherited by Daboll and Schoen. So you can make the argument that, okay, the team has made progress in terms of the defense. Like I said, Malik Neighbors has been all that they expected. Theo Johnson, one of the draft picks, looks like he's an up-and-comer. The draft class from this past year looks pretty solid. The O-line looks solid. What's the one area that continues to struggle? It's the quarterback. And the Giants, we knew back in the spring that they were looking to upgrade at quarterback. We saw it on Hard Knocks. And, we hear it just about every time Daboll is asked about the quarterback and how he kind of sidesteps the issue a little bit. But let's talk about the continuities. Let's stay on that thing. The problem with changing the head coach, just look back to the string of head coaches that the Giants had after Tom Coughlin. Every 2 years, it was a new coaching staff. And every time you bring in a new coaching staff or a new GM, you're starting from square one, which means you bring in a coach and maybe the guys in the locker room that were highly thought of or being developed one way under the previous regime now suddenly aren't necessarily part of the long-term plans of the new regime. I think back to when Joe Judge was hired, for example, and how he wanted Nate Ebner in here as his core special teams guy over Michael Thomas, a move that I'm still shaking my head over. All right, so that's an example of how coaches come in and they want their own guys to kind of take over the locker room. So that messes with the chemistry and the foundation of the locker room. And folks, whether you want to admit to it or not, the Giants do have a pretty solid foundation in the locker room. Dexter Lawrence, all right, Bobby Okereke, Malik Neighbors is growing into a leadership role. Drew Phillips, you can look at on the offensive line, you can make a case maybe definitely you can make a case for Andrew Thomas, even though he's on IR. So there are pieces that are coming together for the New York Giants foundation. The problem now becomes, though, again, when you jettison coaching staffs and guys go away, now all of a sudden the foundation or the backbone that you're trying to build up in terms of the depth and whatnot, that goes away too. And if you look at the Giants draft class as a perfect example, all right, the last several draft classes, I don't think there's anybody left from 2018's class. And that was what, 7 years ago, right? That's pretty sad. 2019, that class is in danger of becoming extinct as well, with the exception of Lawrence. All right. Now, I went back and I looked at some of the draft picks from the past. Guys who were basically discarded because they didn't work out here or the Giants couldn't re-sign them. And they went on to have really solid careers elsewhere, right? You can point to Eric Flowers, who turned out to be a decent guard once he left the Giants. Will Hernandez, who went on to become a starter out in Arizona. Julian Love, the safety, who's out with Seattle, became a Pro Bowler. B.J. Hill, who the Giants traded. Saquon Barkley. Those are just a few of the examples of guys who, from a previous regime, they moved on from. All right. And you ask yourself, okay, why? All right. Now we know why with Saquon, but the other guys, by turning the coaching staff over, maybe, the new coaches that came in wanted to develop these guys differently. I think of Will Hernandez, for example. Will Hernandez in his first season with the Giants was very promising as a player. Then they brought in a whole new coaching staff, and what happened? Will Hernandez wasn't very efficient as he was in the first year. So that's a big reason why I think you want to have continuity. And look, I get it. The Giants leadership brass, they don't always, some of the decisions they make leave you scratching your head. Nothing's going to be perfect. And look, Joe Schoen's drafting so far, the jury's kind of out on it, bordering on not very good, at least for the first two classes or so. But the bottom line is you want to have the continuity. And for that reason alone, there has been progress with this team. And I mentioned the areas they progressed in. Now they just have to say, okay, you know what? We tried to, salvage Daniel Jones. It's not working out. We need a fresh start. He needs a fresh start. Let's get another quarterback in here that you, Brian Daboll, can groom to the way that you want, and that we can hang our hats on and say, okay, this is now truly Brian Daboll's team, Joe Schoen's team. All right, so that's where we stand with the statement by John Mara. And again, the fact that Mara did not come right out and say Daniel Jones is safe, that he did not come out and make any excuses for Daniel as he did earlier in the year when he talked about the injuries and all the stuff that went wrong last year. If that doesn't tell you the direction that this franchise is headed in as far as the quarterback is concerned, then I don't know what to tell you guys, because it's pretty obvious that's where it's headed. All right, coming up next, what's going on at left tackle, that critical position? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks, and you can get in on all the action during weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday, when PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks puts its members first, so all your withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. You get your payouts as soon as within 15 minutes after requesting them. So go on, download the PrizePicks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL, written in all lowercase letters, and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Hey, Giant fans, pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut, and it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make the pre-alcohol probiotic drink your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and pace yourself, and then get a good night's sleep to feel your best in the morning. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl. That's zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money guarantee, so that if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedonnfl. Again, that's ZBIOTICS, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout for 15% off your first order. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And what's going on with the left tackle situation? Well, folks, here's the situation as it is. Joshua Ezeudu, who started off rough last week, finished a little bit better, but not that much. He appears to be headed towards his second start at the position. And I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. You're thinking, why? Why not move Jermaine Illuminor? Why not put Chris Hubbard in there. What's going on with DJ Humphries? I'm going to answer all that for you. All right. Let's start off with moving Jermaine Illuminor. That, folks, I don't see happening. The reason for that is twofold. Number one, TJ Watt of the Steelers lines up almost exclusively across from the right tackle. You do not want to move Jermaine Illuminor to the left side and plug in Evan Neal just yet. Evan Neal, last week, Carmen Brasillo spoke to the media and kind of made it clear that Evan Neal, because he missed the spring and most of the summer, is a little bit behind still on being caught up to where they need him to be. So Evan Neal right now isn't even in the conversation for a spot on that offensive line because he's so far behind. So you could say, well, why not move Illuminor over there and put Chris Hubbard, who the Giants poached off the 49ers practice squad, in at right tackle? I don't get the sense that Chris Hubbard is fully up to speed yet either. All right. Now you figure, okay, well, what's the difference? You play right tackle with the 49ers practice squad. You come over here, you play with the Giants. Every coach has specific things that maybe vary in what they ask of their offensive line. And there's also the matter of learning the signals, the calls, the protection, all that stuff. So I just did not get the impression that Hubbard, even though he said he would be ready if his number was called, I didn't get the impression that he's really an option either. I think the Giants are going to stay with the status quo, which is Joshua Ezeudu at left tackle. You are going to probably see a lot of chipping. You're going to see him not left on an island very often. You're going to probably see a lot of screen attempts, screen passes, anything to get the ball out of the quarterback's hand quickly, which is why, if you think about it, one of the reasons why Daniel Jones's yards per pass attempt was so low last week, because they were trying to get that ball out of his hand quickly. Now, what about DJ Humphries, who worked out for the Giants on, I believe it was Tuesday, it was Monday or Tuesday? The impression I got is that maybe DJ Humphries' price tag was a little out of range, what the Giants wanted to pay. The Giants, remember, their salary cap space is starting to dwindle. They may have to do one more restructure to get through the rest of the year. The injuries aren't helping, obviously. And the injuries that, they're having to positions where, they're key positions. All right. So that being said, I don't think DJ Humphries is going to sign with the team. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully, they work something out, because I think he would be an upgrade, assuming that his knee is better. But right now they're doing all they can to coach up Joshua Ezeudu and make sure that they have a game plan that basically helps him. Now, somebody had asked me on my Twitter account for my upcoming mailbag over on New York Giants on SI, why not just put a tight end over there, every time, you need to pass? Because now you're basically telling the opponent what you're doing. You might as well take a billboard out in Times Square advertising that you're going to pass every time you put a tight end there. So the answer is to chip. The answer is to not leave Ezeudu out on an island. Maybe get some help block from the left guard, and just hope that he builds up his confidence and manages to stay on his feet, because his balance, quite honestly, not exactly what you would hope for at this stage, but I don't know if it's something they can necessarily correct. You hope for the best, because let me tell you something, folks. Daniel Jones, if they're going to stick with Daniel Jones, which we will talk about in the next segment, if he gets beat up behind that offensive line, it's not good. And we'll talk more about it. I don't want to get too far into the next segment, but it's not good. And I think a lot of you know the reason why I say that. So, yeah, it looks like one more week at least with Joshua Ezeudu. We'll see if he's able to hold up. And, maybe Chris Hubbard will be ready. I don't know. But, Chris Hubbard, if I'm not mistaken, he played right tackle primarily when he was with the 49ers. Or actually, in his career, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was primarily a right tackle. So if you've got Jermaine Illuminor saying, look, I don't prefer to move, but I will if I have to, the Giants still haven't solved, really solved that backup tackle position, especially on the left side. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. You hope that Joshua Zhu has a good game. The Steelers defense, not something to sneeze at, not something to take lightly. I think it's a top 10 defense in just about all the macro categories. So I assure you, the coaching staff probably put a lot of thought into making sure that that left side, that the quarterback's blind side, is completely fortified, because if it's not, going to be a long night on Monday night. All right, coming up next, we've been talking about the quarterback. We've mentioned the quarterback. So let's talk about the state of the quarterback, even though the owner doesn't want to talk about the quarterback. That's coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live, play-by-play, and so much more, all on the very same page where you place your bets. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And coming up next week on Monday, my special guest is going to be Ted Wynn, who does film breakdowns for The Athletic. So he will be on my show on Monday. Tuesday, of course, we will have takeaways from the Giants' Monday Night Football game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'll try and get that done for you Monday night if I can. If not, it'll be first thing Tuesday. And then, of course, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, regular shows, Thursday being crossover Thursday. I think the Commanders are up next. So David Harrison, if I'm correct, David Harrison of Locked On Commanders will be on with me for crossover Thursday. And we'll just keep rolling right along, getting through the season as best as we can. Look, we all, know that it's not going well. So hopefully, these podcasts are therapy sessions for you as they are for me. All right, let's talk about Daniel Jones. Now, Daniel Jones, as everybody knows, Brian Daboll said right after that Philadelphia game, Daniel Jones is his starter. The two of them had a conversation at some point this week, and apparently Daboll reassured Daniel Jones that he's his starter. Daniel Jones revealed to the media today that Daboll announced that Jones will remain the starter in games, right? So basically, it's run it back with Daniel Jones, ride or die. All right. Now, I know a lot of people were not happy to hear that. A lot of people groaned. But here's the bottom line, folks. This speaks volumes about how the coaches apparently feel about the quarterback room. Drew Lock, who they put in there against the Eagles to supposedly generate some juice, ignite a spark, wasn't able to do so. The fact that Brian Daboll said that he didn't anticipate making any changes to the distribution of practice reps, that should tell you what he thinks of, the quarterback situation. Daniel Jones, according to Daboll, gives the team the best chance to win. They've won 2 games, right? So it's not like Daniel Jones hasn't won any. But that being said, Daniel Jones needs to pick things up with his game. Too many inconsistencies, too many things. I feel like every week when I do the post-game recap and takeaways, I'm talking about the same things with Daniel Jones, from the slow reads to the double pumps to not trusting his eyes to all that stuff. So Daniel Jones, typically is repeating himself, saying, I've got to play better. I'm focused on doing my job better, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, we get it. Do it. That is if he's capable of doing it. Or is this what we're going to see from Daniel Jones, which is basically what we've seen for the better part of his career here. So here's the other thing, guys. I mentioned the offensive line in the last segment. And on New York Giants on SI, I talked about how the Giants are playing with fire with Daniel Jones, especially with that injury guarantee. You throw in the fact now that you don't have your best blindside protector out there. And my gosh, folks, I could see it now. If God forbid Daniel Jones takes a really bad hit and gets injured significantly, and I'm hoping that that doesn't happen. I don't want to see the kid get injured, because at the end of the day, he's a person like I am, like you are, and I don't want to see, harm befall anybody. But if God forbid that happens, the Giants basically have screwed themselves. Because I'm telling you right now, I looked at the numbers, and next year, if they have to pick up that 23 million injury guarantee, ouch. They're going to have to do a lot of cap gymnastics. Now, I was able to find out that the deadline, that there really is no deadline in terms of when that injury guarantee would kick in if Daniel Jones couldn't pass a physical. So theoretically, if God forbid he got injured, couldn't pass a physical in, say, March, they could take it all the way up to really the first week of the season and carry him to avoid that injury guarantee. Where it comes in is when they start the regular season. All right. So they would have some time. But the drawback, folks, is that on I think it's March 15th, 12 million of Daniel Jones's base salary, 30 million, becomes guaranteed. Now, here's why I think the Giants are willing to take this gamble. 12 million is a lot easier to swallow if you have to than 23 million plus that 12 million. So the bottom line is, it involves a little bit of cap gymnastics here, but the Giants probably figure, okay, you know what? Daniel gives us the best chance to win. If worst case scenario happens and he gets injured, can't pass a physical, we keep him on the roster. He gets the 12 million guaranteed. We can absorb that because you figure, the 12 million they can absorb. They keep him on the roster, and hopefully he passes a physical before week 1 of the 2025 season. The drawback to that, though, is that the 19 million in cap savings that they would get if they were to cut him next year, it's not going to be available. And you would like to have that kind of money available, especially if you plan on being active in free agency, which right now, I don't think the Giants, in terms of their own free agents, really it's Darius Slayton, Azeez Ojulari, and I believe Jason Pinnock. Pinnock will probably be the one that they look to retain. I'd be surprised if they retain the other two. Do they maybe want to get a quarterback in free agency? It would depend on where they end up drafting. Right now, they're 9th in the draft order, but we've got several weeks to go. So there's always a possibility that, okay, do they maybe look for, I don't know, Kirk Cousins or Sam Darnold or some veteran that's out there if they're low enough in the draft order? I don't think that's the way they go. I think, quite honestly, they're better off just drafting a young quarterback, stockpiling picks, which, again, going back to another show I did, is why I said they should stockpile picks and move some guys, especially if the season continues to slip away. So there's a lot of different scenarios here, but I think the Giants have kind of resigned themselves to the fact that, okay, if we have to eat the 12 million guarantee in his salary, should he be injured and can't pass a physical, that's a lot better if we can give him extra time to heal up and be able to pass the physical. So that's how I think their thinking is. I don't know that I agree with it because, look, you want to have every last dollar available so that you don't have to choose between, like they did this year. So you don't have to choose between signing an edge rusher versus re-signing your best safety last year. You don't want to get into that situation. But this is where the Giants are going. I don't get paid to make those decisions. That's Joe Schoen's area, Brian Daboll's area. Let's see what happens. Let's hope for the best, right? All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for spending part of your day with me here. Don't forget, if you watch on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel, like the video, click the little bell for notifications every time I post something new. If you are listening on our audio platforms, a 5-star review is always appreciated. I want to thank you again for listening. I'll be back on Monday with Ted Wynn of The Athletic. In the meantime, everybody have a great weekend, and I will see you next week.